Well, there actually is one right there.
Oh, yeah, right there.
Lavaliers that I can put on.
Oh,
It's not our idea of our concept, so. But thanks for letting me know. Orient things a little bit better.
people sit so far away.
Hey.
You know what I do to my students?
Tell me.
I make them come down. I tell them Pat Summit requires their basketball players to sit in the front.
Good old Pat Summit.
Yeah, so. Oh, that was good.
You want to just kick it in the shroud? I'll wheel you around. Just push it back and forth.
This will bring me quick. So are you headed back home? And are you just gonna stay down?
I'm just gonna stay.
Yeah. Just,
It's a long drive to go back, turn around and again.
yeah. How long are you guys here for?
We'll leave on Tuesday after.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm gonna try and meet with you on Thursday or Friday.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't talked about everything that's going on. I got an email late. It was after 5. Let's I'm gonna talk to Scott. He wants me to teach him. So,
You feel about that?
oh, I'm kind of excited about it, but I've got 2 people that don't want me to. So, you know, so I'm
3 people that can't be placed.
yeah.
They're going to be
Continue.
happy anyway.
Yeah, right, yeah, so.
Which is unfortunate. Okay, are you on her calendar?
Pardon?
Are you on Melanie's calendar?
No, I'm gonna get on there, I'm gonna email her. Did she say much about that meeting on Wednesday?
You know what, other than in passing, I didn't spend any appreciable time with her
Oh, really?
in Nashville. No, because we all were at different meetings. So I saw her at the conference and I just sort of caught up for a minute.
Yeah, oh, okay. Yeah, she's so busy, that's good.
So it's,
I think she's been through hell the last.
that's sort of what I saw. I've heard that from others, that it was a little rough,
Yeah,
but
yeah, it was real rough.
with the second meeting was.
I didn't go to the second meeting, the faculty one, because I thought it was more for the people that were in the governance committee, so I didn't go to that one. And then they had it reserved for the business conference one.
That's pretty small.
Yeah.
That's
They
like,
invited the whole faculty, and we're all supposed to sit in there? I don't think so. So, yeah,
everyone was invited, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so
So
I just,
everybody could be included.
so, yeah, it's,
It's mind-boggling.
so, but, anyway.
We got,
Oh, we got 10:29, let's do that one.
we got a few minutes.
We got a few minutes. But we were told, Scott told us that we were supposed to be in Switzerland. We weren't supposed to speak. I spoke like I was doing. I'm expecting recriminations for me wanting to in Switzerland.
Well, maybe it'll be teaching business associations, and you can think, don't throw me in the briar patch, right?
I like that. Don't throw me in the briar patch.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Well, it is 10:30, so
I'm at your leisure. You want to start?
yeah.
I'm going to do this thing out of the way.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. Why don't you go ahead and we found out quite by accident that we are one of the featured presentations. We were voted number 2 by the potential attendees. So I want to thank you for your votes. And I found out by accident because my husband and I are involved in protracted litigation. We're trying to adopt a little 3-year-old, and we've had him since he's 10 months old. And I never know from one day to the next what's going to happen. And so I was emailing Elmer back and forth and telling him I don't even know if I'm going to be able to present. Then when he told me you were voted number 2, it was like, okay, I will move heaven and earth to get here. And so, and then he offered us the Saturday slot, and we took it. And so here we are. I'm Chris Antobin. I'm an assistant professor at University of Tennessee, and I'm also a reference librarian. And this is my partner, Brad Morgan. He's our interim director at the Betty B. Lewis Career Center, and he's also our associate director of our institute, or his institute, of professional leadership development.
And so really we're excited to be here today to talk with you about some items that we're particularly passionate about and hopefully will be of interest to you all. We would invite engagement and interaction. And we really wanted to focus from the very beginning on one of the driving factors behind sort of the birth of this particular project, as well as its life and the energy that Chris and I continue to pour into it, and the responses that we've received from our external partners, our internal partners, as well as the students that go through this program. And that's really beginning in the first year to engage in experiential learning with our students, helping them to take what they're learning in the classroom, particularly on the legal research and writing piece, and actually using that in a context that allows them to engage in real life experience, where they are using those skills to advance the causes of others and begin to develop those lawyering skills, which are of critical importance, and really what they came to law school to do, right? So it helps connect the reason why they went to law school with their educational goals, with their educational experience. Now, I've heard it said that the first thing that you forget when you go to law school is why you went, and hopefully this has at least a modicum of impact in helping them to remember why they went to law school. And so really that driving force behind this particular project is connecting in the first year what they're learning in the classroom with experiential learning models. And so what we want to do today is we want to talk really through a few pieces. First, we want to provide you with an overview of the project, just a general overview of the project. Then talk a little bit about the legal research and writing curriculum at the University of Tennessee. And then walk you through the actual project itself, basically the way that we have walked through the project, which is beginning with partnerships, both internal and external partnerships. Then introduce you to how we introduce the students to this particular project beginning in the spring semester. Then walk you through how the project is managed and the student interaction and the student piece, and then share with you some of the lessons that we've learned as well as some of the results that we've been able to see. But first, before we get there, just sort of curious from you all, if anybody would care to share. We know it's 10:30 on a Saturday morning, right? Y'all been here for a few days. But we're curious to hear sort of why you're here. Maybe we can speak to some things that are on your mind, if anybody would care to share with us. Yes?
I've actually been talking about doing a similar type of thing with my ALR class and trying to find an organization where the students can do real research for clients.
Thank you. I appreciate that. First of all, thank you for being willing to share with us all here in the room. And what I've heard you say is that you've been thinking about implementing a similar project for your ALR class and just looking for ideas and thinking about what you might be able to do. That's great. Hopefully we'll be able to speak to some of those things. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
We actually do a program with our 2Ls where it's in their leadership program where we get pro bono, sorry, not pro bono, nonprofit corporations to come in with a discrete legal problem, and the teams work through and do that. So what we could learn from you would be really helpful in making sure we're giving them the best information.
Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. So what I've heard you say is that in your 2L program, the leadership program, you've got nonprofit corporations that come in with discrete legal issues, and your 2Ls are able to take a look at those issues. That's great. All right. Fantastic. So again, we're glad that you all are here, and Chris now will take us through and describe sort of the overview, what the project looks like.
Next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. All I did here was I took my proposal and then kind of broke it down into the major parts. We have a 2-semester legal research course, and I wanted to incorporate an experiential learning component in my course, and so then I designed it to instill an early appreciation of pro bono service to the legal profession. Most states now require a minimum of 50 hours, and so I wanted the students to get that early. And then we partner with nonprofit legal aid organizations, and then we task the students, we put them into law firms, and then they actually research real issues. And then I'll get into more detail later. And then as the gentleman just said about providing discrete, our entities provide a discrete, they provide many legal issues, and then the students research those. And then the primary goal today is to help other law schools replicate or create hybrid programs that are similar. And I will share with you, I tried to upload them last night. I actually have a project packet that I'll share with you that it gives you all the assignments and everything. I did not realize when I was loading last night that they wanted PDFs. They would only take PDFs, and I'd rather share it as a document because then you can, cut and paste and change it to your heart's content. And then we also have, it's called a memorandum of understanding it's just a 2-page document that we have our partners sign so we all know what's expected of us. So, go ahead. And then just to give you a background, you need to understand legal process at Rocky Top. Yay, good old Rocky Top. Okay. Whoop. Yeah, here we go. Our legal research and writing is called legal process. It goes 2 semesters. In the fall of the 1L year, we have legal process 1. That's 2 credits. That's legal writing. It's taught by combined law faculty and adjuncts, and that is graded. Then we have the legal research 1 component. That's a 1 credit pass fail or an incomplete. We do have a final exam, and the students are required to get at least 60% on that final exam to pass legal research 1. If they don't get the 60%, we give them a chance at another final exam, but we warn them that to study and to make sure that they make the mark on the first one because the second exam is even harder than the first one. I think that's a little bit heartless, but So anyway, then in the spring, we have legal process 2. That's again 2 credits graded, taught by combined law faculty and adjuncts. And that's where you do the traditional, they write the memorandum or the appellate brief, I should say, and then they also argue towards the end of the semester. And then we have, I've got a typo here. It's legal research 2 again. And this is where we do the pro bono project, and that's the major component. We usually spend about 6 weeks out of the 10 weeks
that were allowed for legal research on the Pro Bono project. So,
I'm sure that we've all had opportunities to work in collaborative relationships, right, or in partnerships, and if your experiences have been anything like mine, on a rare occasion, right, you might encounter a partner or a collaborative relationship that looks a little bit like this slide, right, where we all come in and we say, hey, yeah, we're going to work together, but then somewhere along the way, things go awry. That can happen internally, it can happen externally, right? As you've already heard Chris talk about, one of the key components to this course is bringing in our legal service providers and our nonprofit entities to make sure that our students have positive experiences. But in order to get to that point, it takes a lot of moving pieces internally. And so Chris and I have been able to work together now for, 5 years, I guess, and we have a very good working relationship. We both come to this particular project from sort of a values-based arena where we may not always have the same ideas in terms of how things are going to roll out procedurally when the rubber hits the road, but we come to it with the same values and the same idea, which is to provide our students with an experiential learning opportunity by engaging in public service, pro bono work, supporting nonprofit legal service providers. And when we come to it from that values-based position, everything else has seemed to work out. And so internally, we've been able to work together because we are of a like mind in terms of why we want to advance this particular project, what we care about, what we're hoping our students get out of it, and what we're hoping the nonprofit organizations and legal service providers obtain as well. And so once we were able to develop that relationship internally, what we began to do was to look externally for partners that could provide the discrete projects that are law-related, that would provide our students with an opportunity to engage in legal research and writing that was not make work, right? These were real projects that the legal service providers needed to have accomplished, and due to their limited resources, frankly, just couldn't get to it. But they needed the work done. And so our students were able to take on these projects and are able to take on these projects, which are related to real life issues, real people, right? Live controversies that are going on to advance the interests of the organizations. But in order to do that, right, we have to create these external partnerships. And so what we did in our first year was we reached out to a number of different organizations throughout the great state of Tennessee, right? We reached out to Legal Aid of East Tennessee, Legal Aid of Middle Tennessee, Legal Aid of West Tennessee, Memphis Area Legal Services, Knoxville Bar Association, Nashville Bar Association, Tennessee Alliance for Legal Services. And we did this for a number of reasons. First of all, we were a little bit concerned that we wouldn't get the volume of work that we needed. Right? We should have realized that all of these nonprofit organizations with limited resources would be glad to offload some of the work and have our students do this work. So we really reached out to try to get at least a sufficient amount of work, and what we found is we got more work than we had planned on. We also reached out to these organizations because we wanted a diversity of work, right? We know that some of these organizations were engaged in work in different subject matter areas. In East Tennessee, there was a lot of tax work, for example. In Middle Tennessee, there was immigration work. In West Tennessee, there was a lot of housing issues. So we wanted to provide our students with a lot of different areas where they could look at from a substantive standpoint. We also wanted our students to be exposed to a number of different nonprofit organizations. So we were really excited about having 6 or 7 organizations involved as we launched this project. But then reality came crashing down on us. And we realized that this presented a lot of problems. Logistically, candidly, it was a nightmare to try to balance the schedules of 8, 9 different lawyers throughout the state, along with the legal research and writing professors. It was very difficult to get everyone on the same page. It was challenging when you had groups of students that were looking at very disparate types of issues, different areas of law. It was very taxing on all of us to make sure that the students were actually doing quality work and looking at what they needed to look at. From a quality control standpoint, it was difficult to make sure that all of the assignments that we received touched on all of the aspects of legal research that our students needed to experience, right? They needed the primary sources, they needed the secondary sources, they needed to go to the statutes, case law, all of those things. And because we had very little control over the type of assignments that were coming in from all these various entities, not all of the projects, frankly, provided the learning experience that they needed. and didn't touch on all of the aspects that they needed. And it was difficult to make sure that the students had sufficient work and work that was meaningful. What we also found was that there was more likely to be turnover at these organizations. When you're dealing with 9 different organizations, you're going to have folks who are moving around, right? And so we would establish a connection with one entity, only to have that person go to another entity, right? And then someone else would step in, and because the organization had made a commitment, they would honor that commitment, but they weren't really invested in it, and so it presented a lot of challenges. And so we began to think about that and thought about what intervention could we make to sort of address those challenges and make sure that the students were having the experience that they needed. And we began to focus in on one particular partner that was closer to home, in the Community Legal Office in Knox County, Tennessee, which is the Public Defender's Office of Knox County. The Knox County Public Defender's Office is an interesting organization. They have partnerships with Gideon's Promise, with a number of different groups throughout the nation, frankly because of the public defender there in Knoxville, a gentleman by the name of Mark Stevens. He takes a holistic approach to the view of what the community law office is doing. And so in the law office, he's got lawyers, yes, but he's also got psychologists, psychiatrists, licensed clinical social workers, lawyers who are also involved in helping not just on the criminal charge side, but also helping folks take a look at housing issues, right? Taking a look at benefits issues. And so there are a number of different items that can come out of this particular office. What we also found in Mark Stevens was a partner champion. This is a man who cares deeply about the law, who cares deeply about his clients, and cares deeply about the preparation of future lawyers. And so he was able to speak to issues to his lawyers in his office from a values-based position, much like Chris and I. We were able to share those same values of trying to advance the student's experience from an educational standpoint while offering meaningful service to his clients. And so what we've been able to do is to develop a relationship with Mark Stevens, who's been featured here on the links with NPR. He's been featured with Gideon's Promise, a great individual. And what we found, and what we would suggest to you all, is to the extent you can find a partner champion in an organization, that's going to serve you very, very well. That will allow you to have someone who buys in and who is committed to make sure that the assignments that they receive, that they give to us, that we receive, meet everything that we need to have, while at the same time offering meaningful value to them. And so what we really see is that this is in a way sort of a Mickey Mouse project, right? We've got the needs of the law students, we've got the needs of the legal research and writing program, and we've got the needs of the community partner that all come together to make sure that the needs and expectations of all of the parties are being met. And so what we do in order to launch this particular project is we begin in the spring semester, early in the spring semester, essentially right when the students come back from winter break. And all of our students in the first year class attend mandatory meetings where they all come together, and we try to get them together at the same time because we provide them with an orientation not just to the project, but also to issues related to access to justice and pro bono. And so I just want to share with you a little bit of what that particular presentation looks like, right? We talk with them about pro bono, public interest, and public service work, and the importance that lawyers play in providing public interest and service work. And so I usually just begin with the question of what's pro bono, right? And I'd remind them that even though the words look similar, right, it's not our friend Bono up here. Pro bono is different than that. It's service that, unlike traditional volunteerism, uses the specific skills of a professional to provide services to those who are unable to afford them. So the example I like to use with the students, right, is this guy. Anybody know who this is? Superman, yeah, Superman, right? All right, when he's not wearing the tights and the cape, who is this?
Clark Kent.
Clark Kent. All right, Clark Kent. What's Clark Kent's day job?
Reporter for the great metropolitan newspaper.
All right, works for the metropolitan newspaper, right? So he's a newspaper man. All right. So when he puts on the tights and the cape and saves the day, is he engaged in community service or pro bono work? Community service. Why community service?
Because he's not using his job skills.
Yeah, he's not using his job skills, not using his professional skills. Now, I'm grateful that he stands between us and certain doom, right? But not pro bono service. So if he was to take on a volunteer project, right, engaged in writing a newspaper for a nonprofit organization, that's pro bono service, right? Using his professional skill set. So what about this guy? Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, right? He's He's billing hours as a lawyer. Then on Saturday mornings, he shows up at Saturday Bar, as we call it in Knoxville, where he shows up at the legal aid office and provides free legal advice to indigent individuals. Community service, pro bono work. Pro bono work, right? So we help the students understand the distinction between community service and pro bono work, which we think is important, not for the least of which is the model rules of professional conduct that Chris alluded to earlier, specifically Model Rule of Professional Conduct 6.1, which we know that states that every lawyer has a professional responsibility to provide legal services to those unable to pay. Right? To me, that's pretty strong language. Then we get into the hedge language, right? We suggest that it's 50 hours of pro bono service, that type of thing. But we're able to talk with the students about the importance of Model Rule 6.1 and the role lawyers play in access to justice. And we emphasize to them that all 50 states have adopted some form of Model Rule 6.1. Then we're able to talk with the students about Tennessee in particular, and the Tennessee Supreme Court, which in 2008 unanimously declared access to justice as its #1 strategic priority. And to this day, the court still espouses access to justice as its #1 strategic priority. And as we all know, right, if the court, the high court in your state says, hey, this is what we want to see, the lawyers in the Bar Association are going to try to implement the strategic initiatives of the court. And what they have done is they've tried to say through this #1 strategic priority that their goal is to involve more lawyers and law students in meeting the needs of folks who are otherwise outside of being able to obtain meaningful access to justice. And so we describe how the project in particular, what it does is it allows the students to become in their first year involved in moving the needle on access to justice needs by taking real-life clients, real-life cases, real-life needs, and allowing them to research those real-life needs, the needs of those real-life individuals, and then writing memoranda that will actually be used to help those folks in their particular circumstances. And this is where, for us, we have sort of our exciting moments and sort of the why we do this.
The first year, it was my first year teaching, and so I had only one section. I had 23 students. And Brad had gone through his whole presentation, and I was watching the presentation, and then at the very end of the presentation, one of my favorite students, and I know we all have the students that just touch our hearts, and we never forget them. And this student, he just exclaimed, and he just got up. I mean, he literally jumped up, and he said, "You mean this isn't a hypothetical?" And it was like he was expressing, I am so tired of hypotheticals. And it just was so special, and I know neither one of us will ever forget that moment. And so then we were really motivated to go ahead, and it just got us energized. And the history of the project, go ahead and.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oops.
There we go.
Yeah. I come from a community college background. I practiced law for about 10 years. Then I worked in a community college. They had a paralegal program, and I managed all their legal materials and helped a lot in the legal research component of that they were teaching the paralegals. And I outgrew that job and then applied to University of Tennessee when they had an opening, and I was fortunate out of 40 applicants, they chose me, so I still feel very fortunate. But when I got to UT and I was designing my first course, it was really, really important to me to include in the community college, they call it service learning. And they had oodles of courses where students could go out in their different disciplines and do in service learning. So then when you get to the law school realm, it changes to experiential learning. And of course, ABA Standard 303 is pretty clear that we need to be providing substantial opportunities for experiential learning. And so here's the progress from 2012 to 2016. Spring of 2012 was our inaugural year, and that's, like I said, I just had 23 students, one section. And then in the spring of 2013, we had a new director come on that in July of 2012. So then by the spring of 2013, we decided to apply the project to the entire class so that all of the students would get the same experience. We also made some other changes in that our classes were becoming smaller, our sizes, and then we expanded the number of sections so that it was really nice, because then legal research, instead of having 23 or 25 students, you would have between 12 and 15 in each section. And I prefer the much more intimate, smaller class, because then I can hone in on my students and I can figure out where they're struggling and help them. So anyway, spring 2013, we applied the project to the entire class, and here we're using several partners. And we also used Tails, or was it? Anyway, we were doing Skype interviews. What we do with the students is they actually have to present their work to the attorneys. And so we ended up doing Skype interviews that year. Then in the spring of 2014, one thing that when you're working with this is I pay attention to serendipity. Serendipity is how we got Mark Stevens as our partner champion. And what happened in 2014, we had 3 partners. They all needed handbooks done. And but that's the year we figured out that some of the handbooks didn't cover all the legal research pedagogy that we needed included. In fact, there was, especially the domestic violence handbook, was a lot more like more practical information, you know, like how to manage your finances, how to balance a checkbook, that kind of thing that really strayed away from legal information. So that we call that our Rocky Not So Top Tier. 2015 we hit our stride, and then 2016 we were with the community law office, and then that has really been a boon, because it's great because the students all have criminal law their first semester, and then in their second semester they're applying and researching criminal law issues with the community law office. And basically the sequencing of the project, we set up student law firms. I have done this a number of ways. The first year, and I will never do this again, I thought I knew my students, and so I put them in groups, and that was a disaster. It didn't work out. We had some real I would say personality conflicts. And then the second year I had them count off, and then the third year I offered them a choice. I said, do you want to count off 1, 2, 3, 4, or do you want to get into your own groups? And the third and fourth years, one year they said, it's okay, professor, just you count off. And then this past year they wanted to get into their own groups. And so once I've got the firms set, I let them name their firms if they're so inclined. If they're not, that's not a problem. Then I assign client issues. And one of the things that we do to protect our partner is we assign the same issue to 2 groups. Because if something happens to a group, you know, and life happens. I mean, people pass away, or they have to go to funerals, or whatever. All kinds of different events can happen in the lives of our students, so we want to protect our partner. The first major component assignment is a legal research plan that they get their issue, and they have to do a detailed legal research plan. They send that in to me digitally, and then I look over it, and then I meet with the students, kind of like I'm the senior partner, or a supervising attorney in a public service organization. So then the students go, and part of their legal research plan, they start researching a little bit, but not too much. Then after the meeting, we have them get in the trenches and start doing their legal research. And then they prepare their first draft memorandum and for our service providers. Then they email that to me, then I email those to Brad. He sends them off to the attorneys at the community law office, and they review them. And then the attorneys actually come on campus for the groups or our law firms, and I set up times, and I do it privately, so that I've done it a couple different ways. The first couple of years, the whole class would come in, and then they would get to hear, group 1 would go, then 2, 3, 4, and then 2, 3, and 4 get to hear what's happening with group 1. And I found it better if I just would give the student groups a set time. They have to show up at 1:15, and then they get 15 minutes with the attorney, and then they leave, and then a new group comes in. Because when you have the two groups and you've got one issue, then students can they'll hear the same questions, and then it's the second group is at more of an advantage than the first group that doesn't hear the questions of the attorneys. Those have been, the students love that. This past year they were, and this past year I have to tell you, the gentleman, his name is Jonathan Harwell. He is the most gentle attorney I have ever met. He's an appellate attorney. And the students actually told me they get anxious about it. And I try to tell them, this is a learning experience. I want you to learn. Please don't get stressed out about it. It's a pass-fail class. You're gonna pass. So anyway, Jonathan, when they come in and they're uptight about what are they gonna ask and that kind of thing. And afterwards, so many students told me he's so gentle because the way he phrased his questions, and he was real laid back with them, and I felt they learned a lot. And they even told me so. They told me, Professor Tobin, wow, I learned way more just with that oral presentation than actually doing the drafting of the memo. Then after the in-class feedback with our attorneys, and then the students revise their legal memorandum and then email that, and then we compile and forward those to our partner. The community law office actually saves them in a database, and they can search, the attorneys can search for these memos, and then they've got research that they can start from, and all they have to do is update it. So let's see, where are we? Oh, past issues. This was our very first year, and I think it was July of 2012. The state of Tennessee passed laws where you can do a pro se divorce, and there are, I think most states now have passed these statutes where you can, if you don't have children, or they're very, very simple divorces, but the students had to research both the substantive and procedural law. Expungement is a big issue, and they researched the availability, the offense eligibility, and the procedure, and wrote memos on expungement for Tennessee. And then landlord and tenant rights and responsibilities. And then as I alluded to earlier and talked about earlier, Bridge Over Troubled Waters, our handbooks year. We had domestic violence for the Knoxville Bar Association and landlord-tenant for Legal Aid of East Tennessee, and then the defendant and family handbook for community law office. Now, the handbooks, like I said, we struggled with, and actually what my section had the community law office, defendant and family handbook, and I'll pass this around. This one, and Chris mentioned about she wanted to do it in her advanced legal research class. What happened here was my students didn't do a real good job. So then I didn't. So what I did was I saved the work that they had done in the 1L year, and then in the fall of 2014, I was teaching advanced legal research. So then I had my students do the same thing, team up, and then they each got topics for the community law office handbook. And you'll see it going around. But anyway, Mark, he was so happy, and when I finally sent it to him and said, wow, you're thanking us, thank you, and thank the students for this wonderful piece of work. Obviously, you now realize that while we have hoped that we could put this together over the last 25 years, it's just too massive an undertaking for us with full caseloads. So thank you both very much. One of the things that makes Mark and his office such a perfect partner, and one of the things when I started creating this for my first year teaching, I was really, really concerned about sustainability. How am I going to keep having issues year after year after year? Well, with the community law office this past year, we had 45 issues. And we only had about 20 groups or 20 teams. So, and they have issues, and like he talks, he said, he's told me, Chris, we have things that are 25 years old that we still need to get to. And they want to get to. The other issue too that we didn't talk about too much that we struggle with when the attorneys come in, a lot of them have caseloads, and we'll set up our schedules, and then we'll get a call that morning that they're in court or something happened, and so we do end up scrambling, but all we do is we call the legal secretary, or actually she's the project manager at the CLO. Her name is Laura Chambers, which I think is very fitting for the office. She'll get us someone to come in and still look at the memos and make sure that the students get to present their project to a real live attorney. So, and these were our 2015 issues. Some of them, inmate lack of access to pencil, paper, books, and razors for shaving. Now the razors is pretty clear, and that they're not going to get access as inmates to razors. The right to recreation time out of a cell, access to a law library, phone access for participating in their own defense, visitation by Skype. One thing that's happening in Tennessee, they're actually eliminating in-person visits where you can't go visit an incarcerated person, and they're implementing Skype, and so students actually are researching constitutional issues on these on these issues. And then rights regarding attending religious services, and then a checklist for getting off the sex offender registry. And then on the next slide, Jonathan, he sent me this memo, and I'll go ahead and pass that around. And the memo actually gives the real detail, and then I cut and paste that and give that to my students as their assignments, the legal issue that they're going to be researching. And the Tennessee Gang Enhancement Statute was really a lot of fun this year because just within days after they finished their memos, then they were sending me, the Supreme Court of Tennessee had actually made a very, very good decision on the enhancement statute, and so the students were able to update their memo with that information. The students really get into this. They collar me or grab me by the arm in the hall, and they'll say, "Oh, Professor," especially when we're in the early parts, "Oh, Professor Tobin, I'm so interested. I'm so glad we get to work with a public defender," and that. So it's really an energizing thing to do. Then we had another issue was conflict of interest issues relating to DUI grants. Prosecutors actually get DUI grants for prosecuting DUIs, and is that a conflict of interest? And then hearsay in domestic violence cases, restitution and cost issues, juvenile detention issues. That was a big issue, especially if juveniles come into court they are detained or put in jail over the weekend, and then they have to stay. And we're trying to change the laws in Tennessee so that they get hearings quickly and don't have to be in over the weekend. Reasonableness as a jury standard, and one of my favorites was using Craigslist to solicit prostitution clients. The legal research pedagogy that we cover the first semester is what I call coordinated legal research coverage. We generally have 10 sections of legal research, and then it's taught we divide it up between 3 professors. And then we cover in order legal authority, basic research concepts, basic secondary authorities, the basics of statutory law, and researching case law. That's usually 2 parts. It's taken up usually over 2 weeks. And then legislative research, and then of course always with searching the basics for what I now call Wexburg. Yeah.
And so it's been described, there are a lot of moving pieces to this particular project, and really project management of this project is very, very critical, both internally and externally. And so we just wanted to run through here real quick sort of our time frame that we have found workable after a lot of trial and error. This is what we found that works for our particular circumstances, is that in July, Chris and I will go and meet with our community partners and just remind them about the project, remind them it's coming up in the fall, right? One of the things that I know when you get out of law school, you get into practice, is that suddenly seasons have no meaning. Fall, winter, spring, summer, they're all the same, right? So we go and meet with our folks in July, remind them the project's coming up in the fall, just recommit, talk about what we can offer, what they can offer. We then receive in August this list of 45 issues that Chris mentioned, right? We receive a list of proposed issues from our community partner. And then really important that we found just the last 2 years is that then September through October, we will have a research assistant actually vet the particular issues, all these 45 issues. The research assistant will vet these issues to make sure that they touch upon everything that the students need, from the primary to the secondary, to the statutes, to the case law, the administrative rules. That way we know that the issues that have been presented are going to actually permit our students to engage in meaningful and substantive work where they'll be able to draw upon their skills. And we can avoid these circumstances where it's sort of more practical advice. So that's a really important piece we've discovered in the last 2 years is vetting these particular issues, not coming to a conclusion, right, but just making sure there's sufficient material out there that the students can get a good experience. Then in November, we go ahead and we finalize the due dates and sort of how the project's going to roll out. And then in December, we do finalize that kickoff date where we introduce the students to the projects and these ideas of access to justice. And then in January, we'll begin that presentation. And then the law firms are formed. The students do their project plan. They engage in the first round of drafting, meet with their lawyers, and then finalize the project in March. So we were able to get that out. We've been able to do this over the last few years, and just recently we've had a couple of things happen for the project.
Just recently, we were featured both in Tennessee Law Magazine and then on Quest. We actually sat down with Mark Stevens and with a reporter, and she created a story from, it was about an hour, I think, that we sat down with Mark and shared our story. And then this past Monday, June 13th, I think 13 is a lucky, powerful number. Our work was featured in Quest, and Quest is a journey directed by a noble purpose. And so you, our audience, are on this journey with us. So please reach out if you'd like assistance creating a similar program or project, and we can help, and we'll both be happy to help. There's our emails, and I will PDF this and load it soon. And then one last thing, shameless plug. We last year we presented at the Institute of Law Teaching and Learning Conference in Spokane, and they invited us to write a chapter about our experiential learning project. And the book is edited by Emily Grant, Sandra Simpson, and Kelly Terry. They are co-directors of the ILTL, and the publishing date is December 2016, but there's a lot more detail in the book chapter. So, questions?
Yes.
I have a question that's not really, this is wonderful, and I'm so excited about it, and I hope our faculty are excited about it, but we'll see. It's not my team, so, not on me. Anyway, so I'm curious about, I realize that you're letting the students self-select their partner, so I realize this isn't a class and how to get along with others. But I'm wondering if you noticed a difference in the quality of the actual work, because it seems like kind of forcing people who don't necessarily get along, but you have to work with people all your life that you don't necessarily get along with. It seems like that's almost more real world, and I realize that's not the point of your class, but did you notice a difference in the quality of the work?
So let me paraphrase. So the question is, do we notice a difference in the students' quality of their work? Yes. That's an emphatic yes. The students, when they pick their own groups, I think their work quality is higher than when we count off, or especially the first year. And what I did the first year was I took all their names and put them out on the dining room table, and I thought I knew the strong students and tried to match up the strong ones with the ones that weren't, I thought, and that kind of didn't work really well. And I think what works the best is to have them choose their peers, especially for the first year. I do lecture and talk about getting along with people. I have in one of the sessions, and then also too, I'll ask them when they come in for their individual, where they're just coming into my office and it's only 3 or 4 students, I'll ask them if they're experiencing any issues, how can I help? And there was something else I was going to say about that, but there is a huge difference. And the other difference I noticed, and I don't know if it's just this past year, but this past year, the writing skills of the students were not nearly as good as the previous 4 years. And I've noticed that in other sessions here, presenters are mentioning that the students, their writing skills are just not very good, or where they should be, or where we expect them to be when they're coming out of college. So.
Please, yeah, sorry.
So it seems like
Thank you for the question. So as I hear the question is, we receive the issues from the community partner in August, and then the students begin working in January, but they don't provide the deliverable until March. There's an extended period of time there, so is there really value added? So first, I would say, yes, there's value added there. The way that we're seeing what we're hearing from our partners in terms of where the value comes from is that, at least with this particular partner, these issues arise in a host of their cases, right? So these are issues that are not just related to John Doe or Jane Doe. These cases are related to all of the folks who are being charged or who will be charged with a particular status offense or who will be charged under a statute. And so these are issues that help them help their clients. Candidly, are there going to be a few clients that need it or could use it in August? And since we don't deliver it until March, those particular clients won't be helped. I imagine the answer to that question is yes, there will be some folks who aren't helped. But because those are issues that are not just related to that particular individual, but are related to the sort of the whole class of folks that are in those circumstances, they are seeing the value there. Is that responsive at all?
Do you help the CLO with that knowledge management piece, where you just give them the product and then it's up to them to preserve those memorandums?
Sure. So the question is, do we help the CLO with the knowledge management piece, or do we hand over the memos and they maintain and manage that? They have their own in-house system of knowledge management, and so we provide the memos, and they host it on their knowledge management system and make it searchable on their particular system.
The reason I'm now we have the Cornell Legal Research Clinic, but it's not for one else, so I think we are going to get experiential learning. But for us, we have to turn around. So we have the 2 L's and 3 L's, and we're working with the clients themselves. So they meet with the clients, and then they have to turn around. They have to turn around, which is exhausting for us. We're continually doing the research to make sure that they have a quality work product. So every semester it's a lot of work, but that's why it's so much your model.
It sounds like you're creating a bank of information that they could go to if they need to, right?
Yeah, so the comments are, it's a lot of work to take on sort of an individual case at a time, is what I heard, which is what y'all are doing. And then, sure, and that 3-week, 2-week turnaround period, for what it's worth, we have sort of an extracurricular program through the Pro Bono program that engages in work like that. So the curricular piece for us is exactly to your point over here, is that we're building that database of research that they can draw upon, which is being constantly updated as our legislature engages in all kinds of things and changes statutes and that type of thing. And so for us, the sort of the more immediate needs, where they say, hey, we need this in 2 to 3 weeks, that'll be handled through our Pro Bono program. And then the curricular piece, which is the creation of a database, is handled through the curricular piece.
So then, since you're creating like this database for CLO, does that mean that they have ownership over that work product? So like if you wanted to scrub it of identifying information, and like if you want to partner with the LAI or someplace to generate, I mean, this is just, have you ever thinking about broadening that database, accessibility to that database of information that you're creating on the CLO, or is it your partnership with them and then they own that?
So question, as I understand it, is have we thought about or encountered broadening the use of those memoranda outside CLO, so we scrub it of sort of identifying information and then share it with other entities? Candidly, it's a bridge we haven't crossed. We haven't even encountered that bridge. It's a great idea. I mean, it's a great thought, something we'll need to think about, but that's not something that we've encountered at this stage. But I appreciate that. So it's gonna give me something to think about, keep me awake at night. Yes.
I guess it's kind of a twofold question. Number one, what kind of vetting do you put in place to make sure that these things are correct, that they are generating and sending to these legal aid organizations, number one? And then number two, I guess what kind of agreement do you have set up, or is there a piece, and hopefully this will never come up, but there's also, to me, a malpractice issue, or a potential malpractice issue here And what kind of checks and balances do you have to put in place to address that? I think that one good one is having more than one team work on a particular issue to kind of cross-check, but do you have other things put in place? And was that something that you and the office negotiated beforehand or even, talked about, and is it covered in your agreement?
Sure. So great questions, and I'm going to try to summarize real quick. The first part is what processes do we have in place to vet the final product to make sure that it's quality, it addresses the issue, and that's sort of tied to that second piece. So what do we do to make sure that there's not malpractice going on, and is it addressed in our memorandum of understanding? Is that in the ballpark? So the memorandum of understanding does clarify that at the end of the day, it's on the CLO, right? They are getting access to these materials, but in terms of their reliance on it, right, that's for them to do. And so they're sort of, as I see it, we have built in there sort of 3 layers of quality control. So we've got the first one, which is where the research assistant sort of vets the project just to make sure what's out there. And what we get back from that, my understanding, is we get back not just, yes, there's material, but here are the salient pieces, right? So we can then go back and double check to make sure that those pieces have been brought in. The second piece, and even though it's a great educational experience, it also acts as a protection, is when we bring the lawyer in with the students to talk about the initial draft before the final draft. That's an opportunity for an intervention where the lawyer says, y'all are completely off base here. And we've had that happen where the students have gone completely off track, and the lawyer, I mean, I liken it to when I was, an associate at a big firm, and I'd sit down with the partners, right? And they'd say, hey, Brad, thanks for billing these hours, but the product's terrible. So go back and do it again, right? And here's what you need to look at. So that's sort of a second piece where the lawyer comes in, and it's not just, even though Jonathan's gentle, I mean, he's a fierce advocate, right? He's going to make sure that the students are on the right track. And then the third piece is, so when we get down, we grade it, right? And we can sort of say, okay, did you address what was vetted? Did you address what Jonathan said, right? And then when we provide that over, I mean, under the memorandum of understanding, they ultimately take responsibility for it.
One of the things I do when the students do their attorney presentations or presentations to the attorneys, I sit right next to the attorney and I take notes on what that attorney wants to see in the final product. And then when I grade, then I've got my groups or teams and what needs to be in there, and then I can double check. So that's a way to protect and keep the quality up.
Can I ask one more question? I'm very sorry. I'll just take time. But do you have a clinical program, of course, at the University of Tennessee? So why not partner with the clinical program rather than partnering with the society?
Sure. So why not partner with the clinical program? First, I'm going to put in a plug for us. We do, in fact, at Tennessee have the oldest continuously operating legal clinic in the nation. So go UT. But why not partner with them? So that's actually something that we sort of thought about. But we would get into some of these issues that were raised earlier, right? That there's an immediate need, right? So it's, oh gosh, we need this in 2 weeks because the life of the case won't be that long. Also, is there going to be uniformity of experience, right? There may not be a vetting that can take place to make sure that the appropriate research pieces are being touched upon. Do they address issues that the students can handle, right? So there were some complications there that, although we didn't delve in too deeply, the CLO sort of was a good option.
Yeah, we're actually in a dialogue of creating what we would call, we're at the very beginning stages, but we're talking about a mini clinic experience for the 1Ls, and we would just move it under the clinic because we want more students to get clinical experiences, and we're noticing that they're not enrolling in those clinic courses, and so we're thinking about possibly, trying to figure out a way to expose the students to a clinic in their first year to whet their appetite for, 2 and 3 out year. So
There's a question to that. We have one more question, maybe.
I'm curious, how, and I may, this is touching on that, like, how do you two separate what do you each do? You teach, Chris, right? But what do you do, Brad?
I take on hats and put off hats. I do a lot of different things. So the reason, maybe the best way to phrase sort of what I do is why I got involved, is because one of the hats that I wear is that I run the Pro Bono program, so I'm essentially like a relationship broker, if that makes any sense.
You're in the law school part, and Chris is in the library part?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. I'm in the law school part, Chris is in the library part, yes.
And that's what makes this work.
And
That's a significant factor.
That connection, I guess, with the law school.
I think that's right, you do need that piece with the law school. Yeah. Do we have like 30 seconds? I saw it in her hand.
yeah.
Really quickly, have you got any process for students to give feedback on other students' contributions to the group?
So that's a fantastic comment. So I in the spring, right, for upper division students, I teach a legal project management class and a leadership class where we also take on service projects, but it's with 3 Ls. Primarily, we really dig into this group dynamics piece that was mentioned earlier. In that class, 25% of their grade is based upon evaluations of their colleagues. We have not done that in this class, but I really like that. But that's a personal bias, but that's a great point.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
By the way, Egypt is,
What we'll do is, I'm gonna close this out. Oh, not that one. I already closed it out, so what we'll do is,
I think they're done with presentations now.
You're not annoying.
I have another one for you. So the very last thing you said really interested me. So in our clinic, we just tried this last semester, bringing back 2 of our clinicians, the senior clinicians, to help manage the audit for tracking, which is too exhausting to do the research. And we still backed up their research. That was nice to have. So, but I really don't want to not so how do you
Yeah, absolutely. And if I had one, I would exchange with you, but I left my suit coat down in my car. But I will reach out to you. I'll reach out to you.
I might have missed it. So
Absolutely.
what tools are you using to guide
Does the, I mean, do you find that, that larger tool
how you
is
guide
functional?
them to sort of assess other areas and sort of what that looks like?
Yeah.
Is there,
Yeah.
or how you get them to do good management, like 3 through 1 for trying to meet a goal?
And right, and do you want to go down to 2? Yeah.
That's what we found. The senior clinicians really needed a lot of guidance for how to sort of.
I mean, I just do groups for like clinicians, which is like, yeah, so I tend to
Understand this
do
person.
Sure.
rather than up
Then we had another one.
because it always strikes me that with board, I'm just too spread out and for at least for
I'll be
that,
happy
that
to share some
intense
stuff. Not that they'll maybe, they may not be appropriate, right? They may be not what you're looking for, but I'm happy to
With
share.
4-ish, there is no possibility that they will work together, but I mean, so it's a different situation, I'm just curious. Because kind of what your project.
There are some folks, yes, some folks who do. I personally, I don't, but that's, I'm not on that side. But I know some folks in the law school. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, we just love it because it helps us track our students.
So what I use is, for my purposes on that, is I use simplicity. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
No,
Sorry
thank you.
for-
Oh, no, I enjoyed the dialogue. Thank you.
We had a
Appreciate
final
it.
product and
Hey.
And,
Right.
and totally personal note, you work with JY, right? Yeah, I'm Nina Schultz at Cornell, so. Yeah, so I know really well.
Sure. So it's housed out of our Institute for Leadership, and so we saw that there was a need for our students to be able to learn how to work in groups, work together. And I thought there was a need for that.
so, but I've seen your name and.
Yeah, we presented together
How you
last summer
actually
and,
okay.
So I found a lot of value as I was going through business school, this sort of the project management piece, and that really helped me. And something I saw some of my colleagues have, and I thought, I would love to be able to use some of these goals, or to strive to meet some of these goals we have for getting to think about.
yes, yeah, I know that, because she's.
Teamwork, to think about leadership skills, right, to think about how to engage with clients, and all of these aspects, and I thought, oh my God, this piece classes. So essentially what we do through the course is we spend the first couple of classes talking about leadership characteristics, attributes, just generally, how you develop them, what are barriers to developing those attributes. And then we spend sort of the next couple of classes talking in great detail about group dynamics. And so I bring in a couple of my colleagues from the business school who talk about group dynamics, organizational behavior issues. We engage in the Myers-Briggs assessment, right? And so we have them really focus in on this idea of group dynamics and group interaction. That takes about 3 classes. And then for the next 3 classes, I do sessions on project management and legal project management. We run some exercises in class. I give them some templates. I talk to them about what it looks like at big firms, small firms, share some software. And then we have them take on a service project that's legal related. What I said, legal related. So it's not like representation. So an example that we've done in the past, right? This last semester, we worked with a farmer's market that was wondering, should we incorporate? Should we not incorporate? Right? What are some tax implications? And so we took on a project that was essentially saying, hey, y'all are wondering about whether or not you should incorporate. We're going to tell you about what the ramifications are, what benefits might be, what drawbacks might be. We partnered with the Southeastern Tennessee Development District, who had a question for us that said, look, there are these rural counties where they're not getting adequate medical care because there's no hospital, there's nothing, right? So what does it look like to create a regional medical health care authority? And so we looked at that issue for them, right? And they worked in teams to do to sort of explore and then write up and present to the board, actually, the Southeastern Tennessee Development District and the board of this particular farmers market. So they're like law related, but not exactly like representation or like heavy duty legal research. Because for us, it's not the substance that matters. It's the planning, it's the skills. And so it's really skills based because we're saying, look, how do you plan the project? And that's a quarter of their grade is the actual planning of the project. And then they implement, manage it right, and then there's deliverable.
This is so fascinating. Like, so I'm actually getting into the work stuff. So I find like there's so many ways to work it in, but I'm having like struggling on like how to work it into my ALR class, and is it appropriate to do a unit on that too? Because I think it's so there's not a class like that they get.
Yeah.
And it is maybe it's not like a part of like typical research that you would think, but it is one of those skills that
Oh, it's an important skill.
Yeah,
it's a really important skill.
Yeah, I'm just like so curious. Like how,
and so we call ours, right, because since it comes under the Leadership Institute, we call ours Leadership Practicum. That's what it's called, but it's a project management course. And so we've got, so for example, for the first years, we've got a new 1 credit hour course that's called Leadership and What Do Lawyers Do. The very second years, we've got Lawyers as Leaders, which is essentially a survey course about different roles that lawyers have and how they've gotten there and challenges they face. And then for the third years, we've got this practicum, which is, as you to your point, is very skills-based about the project management piece. And that's where it's focused.
They really made that, because a lot of we all go to firms, but that's like basically what it is. It's just project after project.
And that was it helped me out going through the business program because I saw that, gosh, everything that I do is a project.
Yeah.
Whether it's small, right, or big, it's all project. And so if I can have some tools or some rubrics to help me plan and then manage, right, my efficiencies are going to go up, the quality of the product's going to be better. I'm going to get a greater understanding on the front end of what it is I'm even trying to do, right? So it was, and it's going to help. It makes my clients happy, that type of thing. So. Do
you mind if I ask you? Can I look at one of your rubrics that you give out?
Yeah, no problem.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you wouldn't mind?
No, happy to do it. I'm happy to share materials. Do you have a card or anything?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it. So it's not. So they're not. What we give the students are not overly sophisticated because they don't have the context, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, happy to share what we have.
Yeah, just to get a sense of what you have in there. You know what? I just gave my last card out to somebody. Can I just write it down?
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
And let me see. Let's. If you don't mind, we can just do it on the front of that card.
Yeah,
okay.
that would be great. So my full name is Anupama Paul, but I go by Anu. So it's PALANFEC.
Yeah, write down the tools. Yeah, I'll get those to you. I'm on the road for the next week, so maybe a week or so there.
Thank you so much. I really, this was great.
I appreciate coming in here.
Thank you.
It's been
Thank
good.
you very, very much.
No worries. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
We'll be in touch.